Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania has finally arrived, so here's everything you need to know about the heroes and their new villain Kang. Before seeing the new film, 2015 Ant-Man introduces Scott Lang, a well-meaning thief who has just been released from prison. Scott desperately wants to reconnect with his young daughter Cassie and prove himself to his ex-wife Maggie and her new fiancé Paxton. Unfortunately, the only job the ex-con can find is at Baskin-Robbins ice cream, so Scott agrees to help his friend and former cellmate Lewis commit a burglary. Other members of Lewis's crew include Dave and Kurt. During the heist, Scott sneaks into a home and breaks into a heavily armored safe, only to find a mysterious suit. Scott takes the suit home and tries it on, discovering that it has the power to shrink him down to the size of an ant. Horrified by his experience, Scott breaks back into the home to return the suit, but is then caught and arrested. The home's owner, Hank Pym, helps break Scott out of jail and reveals that he had manipulated an unaware Lewis into orchestrating the heist as a test for Scott's thieving skills. Hank Pym is a genius scientist that had developed Pym particles, which allow its user to shrink or grow at will, as well as a cybernetic helmet that allows the wearer to communicate with ants. Using this technology, Hank and his wife, Janet Van Dyne, became the superheroes Ant-Man and the Wasp. Janet was killed decades ago after shrinking too much and going into the subatomic quantum realm. In the present, Hank has been kicked out of his own company, Pym Technologies, by his former protege, Darren Cross. Cross develops his own version of the Pym particles and creates a supersuit of his own dubbed the Yellow Jacket. As Cross prepares to sell his dangerous technology to the villainous Hydra organization, Hank plots with Scott to break into Pym Technologies and steal the tech to keep it out of enemy hands. Helping train Scott for his mission is Hank's daughter, Hope Van Dyne, whom Scott takes a romantic interest in. Hope not only blames her father for her mother's death, but also resents him for entrusting a stranger like Scott to save the day, instead of allowing her to don the old Wasp suit and defeat Cross herself. Eventually, Hope recognizes that her father only wants to protect her from a similar fate as her mother, and the two reconcile. Hank's plan comes to fruition as he hopes Scott and Louise's crew all work together to break into Pym Technologies to steal the Yellow Jacket tech. Unfortunately, Cross discovers the heist and uses the Yellow Jacket suit to battle Scott. Eventually, Cross captures Cassie, demanding Scott give him the Ant-Man suit and the Pym particles, going against Hank's previous warnings. Scott goes subatomic to defeat Cross, who uncontrollably shrinks out of existence. Scott then manages to leave the quantum realm and reunite with his family. Maggie and Paxton are impressed by Scott's heroism. Scott and Cassie bond, and Hank gains a renewed hope that Janet is somehow still alive in the quantum realm. And as the film comes to a close, Hank finally trusts his daughter to take up the Wasp mantle. Scott Lang is next seen in Captain Civil War as the heroic Avengers team caused unknowable damage and destruction during their quest for peace. The United Nations realized the heroes had too much power to remain unchecked. And so the UN passes the Sokovia Accords, which grants them complete power and oversight over all superheroes. While heroes like Iron Man and Black Widow support the Accords, others, like Captain America, greatly oppose them, trusting their own judgments over those of a panel of politicians. And so the Avengers fracture into two groups, leading to an all-out civil war. One of the many members recruited for Team Cap is Scott Lang, who joins in on the epic hero versus hero fight. Ultimately, Team Cap is defeated, and Scott Lang finds himself arrested alongside his allies. The story continues in Ant-Man and the Wasp. 2 years have passed, and Scott Lang is days away from completing his house arrest sentence when he begins receiving visions from Janet Van Dyne from the quantum realm. Hank and Hope kidnap Scott from his home, placing his ankle monitor on a giant ant so as not to set off any alarms. The trio then devised a plan to build a tunnel to the quantum realm inside a shrunken version of Pym's lab, which would allow them to rescue Janet. To build the tunnel, they attempt to buy a part from a black market dealer known as Sonny Birch, who in turn double-crosses them to steal Pym's technology and research for himself. And Sonny isn't the only person after Pym's tech, as Hank's former colleague Bill Foster needs the tech for himself. Bill is working alongside a young woman named Ava Starr, who goes by the moniker Ghost. Ava's parents were killed in an experiment which left her quantumly unstable. Although Ghost has the power to phase through objects and become invisible, she also was dying and in a state of constant pain. Foster needs to use energy Janet had absorbed from the quantum realm to cure Ava, but Hank fears this will kill his long-lost wife and refuses to help. As the various parties all fight over Pym's miniature lab, Hank manages to enter the quantum realm and rescue Janet. Lewis's crew arrive to defeat Sonny Birch and his men, and Janet agrees to give some of her energy to Eva, temporarily stabilizing her. As the film comes to a close, Scott Lang returns home without having been caught for evading his house arrest, and is finally released from his sentence. Janet is finally reunited with her husband and daughter, while Scott and Hope's romance continues to grow stronger. But that's not where the story of Ant-Man and the Wasp ends. In Infinity War, the villainous Thanos goes on a quest for power, killing his daughter Gamora and reformed villain Loki along the way. Eventually, Thanos defeats the Avengers and collects all of the Infinity Stones, which gives him the power to wipe out half of the entire universe's population with a snap of his fingers. This snap occurs as Scott Lang is in the quantum realm, collecting energy to further stabilize Eva. As Hank, Janet, and Hope monitor Scott from the outside, Thanos snap wipes them from existence, leaving no one to pull Scott out of the quantum realm, trapping him there indefinitely. In Avengers Endgame, 5 years have passed since Thanos' snap. The surviving Avengers are depressed and defeated, unaware of how to move on. After a rat accidentally activates the quantum tunnel and pulls Scott Lang out of the quantum realm, he discovers that most of his loved ones are now dead. And although Cassie has survived, she is now a teenager. This greatly confuses Scott, as even though 5 years had passed on Earth, only 5 hours had passed for Scott inside the quantum realm.